Everybody, welcome back to the Point. Hope you're all doing well on this Tuesday. Fresh off a big weekend in the world of sports and a Monday that had some interesting things as well. Today, I plan to do two shows. I'm going to talk about the first round of the NHL postseason, Stanley Cup Playoffs, as many people like to call it. Dive into the Game 7s, the Game 6s, the games that ended these respective series that I haven't touched on yet. So that's my plan, is to talk about that right now and get into some NBA. Then later this afternoon, come back onto the show and talk about the second round, preview the series, talk about the interesting matchups that I think will be cool to follow and things of that nature, just observations I've made from round one involving these respective teams. And also talk about the NFL draft because I have some thoughts. The NFL is always in the news. They're always in the news. They're always creating headlines. There's always something to talk about. Certain teams, draft picks, trades that I like. So I want to touch on that as well. I would be remiss if I don't because I love talking about the NFL. So that's the plan of attack today. If I get that all done, I hope so because I want to talk about all this stuff. And I got a lot of thoughts and everything. And as just to let you all know, Thursday, I am moving. I currently live in Rexton. If you're not familiar with me and you just listen to the show, I am moving to Fredericton, which is about a 2-hour drive, and that should be fun. I'm moving without a job, so technically I'm unemployed, which is an interesting move. Making my parents proud with that one. The show will continue. I will have a different location. Hopefully it looks good. Things of that nature. So that's what's going on this week. I still plan to do shows. I'd love to do one Thursday. I'm going to do one tomorrow for sure. Plan on doing two today. Going into the weekend, there's a UFC pay-per-view this weekend, which I can't wait for. So that's on the docket. That's what's happening for me. So that's what's happening with my life, and that'll just be transpiring over the next little while. Just the move and different things, but nothing will change when it comes to hopefully the quality of the content. My face will still be the same, unfortunately. So that won't be changing. But the move is happening Thursday. Some things are changing in that way for the show. But the content, my face, my opinions will remain the same, for better or for worse. But let's pivot into, this series, you have to start with this series, right? I wouldn't have to, but I also know my audience, and I know my audience, most of them are Leafs supporters, and this is, just want to start off, hats off to the Toronto Maple Leaf, hats off to Leafs Nation for finally winning a first-round series. First time the Maple Leafs have won a first-round series since 2004. 2004, yeah. I was 6 years old in 2004. I am now 24 years old. That's a long time. A few things have changed in the Leafs and obviously in yours truly. But the Leafs did something that, and I'm going to keep this opinion because I believe it. I know it to be true. The Leafs did something that every one of their fans should have expected them to do, and that's win this series. Why? Because the Maple Leafs were the better team. The Maple Leafs were the better team. They were the fresher team, and it showed on the ice. Toronto was the better team in maybe 2 of the 6 games, which is funny, and yet you still win the series. But we see this on the other shoes on the other foot in different scenarios. In past years, if you recall the Montreal series, Montreal beat Toronto, but Montreal never outplayed Toronto. That 7-game series, I don't know if they outplayed them in 1 game. In particular, how great Carey Price was in that series, and the Leafs got goalied a little bit. It was different. It was a more frustrating defeat because of the opponent. obviously because he's such a bitter rival. But at this on the same coin, it was also, I think you felt like you should win this series. You go through Columbus, probably should have won that one. Last year against Tampa, I think they should have won the series. I thought they were the better team. Oddly enough, I thought Toronto played better overall in the series last year than they did this year, and they win this year. So that is just pro sports. Sometimes justice is not done. Sometimes somebody is not sent to jail for murder. Some people are speeding and don't get a traffic ticket. Happened to me a couple weeks ago. So sometimes you get the bounces, sometimes you don't. And looking through the Leafs' calamity of, you could call them errors, a calamity of years of failure, you have to, if you look at the big picture, there's different head coaches, there's different GMs, there's different players. But in this iteration of the team where Matthews has been around and Marner and Morgan Riley, and obviously Kyle Dubas has been here for a hot minute, I think the Leafs have built good teams but have had poor results. I think they've done it the right way to a point, but they didn't ultimately get what they deserved. I thought they outplayed their opponents in series, but they didn't win. They might have been a little more skilled than their opponents, but didn't get over the top. So looking at everything in totality, the Maple Leafs were built to compete with these teams, were built to maybe outplay them, but they didn't have that one key ingredient, and that was the killer instinct. That was the wherewithal, the will to win. The will to kill, if you will. Kill Bill. But the Maple Leafs, this season, it was cruising, it was fine, and they never worried about their position. They got to play free, and that can be a dangerous position because you gotta look at the whole thing. You gotta think of, what can we do here? What's happening? What's transpiring? And what I think the Maple Leafs did this year was they said, if we're going to go down with the ship, if we are going to lose, we're going to build a tough team with, we think, a lot of guys that might have the wherewithal, the fortitude to get us over the hump. You look at guys like, and I truly think this player was the Maple Leafs' best defenseman in the series. More than Morgan Riley, because Morgan Riley will have the numbers, and it'll be the shiny thing you look at. Okay, that's fine. If you want to just go by statistics, go ahead. The best defenseman on the Toronto Maple Leafs through the entire first round was Luke Schenn. It was Luke Schenn because he never made a mistake. He was on the ice for one 5-on-5 goal the entire series. Luke Schenn was playing big minutes. He was being physical. He would attack the other team's best players. He did it all, and you didn't notice him. You noticed Justin Hall. Leafs fans hate him. You noticed Eric Gustafsson. He gets in for one game. He's the reason Tampa scores a goal to tie the game 1-1. Every other defenseman had some moments where you go, yikes. Luke Schenn didn't. Luke Schenn really didn't. He was calm. He was their best exit pass out of the zone, and he was what the doctor ordered. He did his job and some. And that can be a problem moving forward to expect that through another 3 rounds. We'll get there later. But through this first round, if you just look as to why they won, Luke Schenn's a huge reason for that. Jake McCabe, another huge reason for that. He was extremely good. He was simple. He played the Jake Trouba role, if you will. Big hits, physical, clogging up the neutral zone. Whatever you have to do in that moment, just the dirty stuff that some people just won't do or aren't capable of doing. He has the body type. He has that drive. He has that killer will to go do it. Jake McCabe was a great ad. Luke Schenn was a great ad. Mathew Tkachuk, to his credit, I'm not saying I'm wrong in my opinion that he's overhyped, but he's a good player. He's a good player, and the best quality that Matthew Nyes has is that he knows his role on this team, and you don't have to tell him it. That is some of the best things in my mind. It's like having a group project. If you're a really good writer and you have another person that just gives a great presentation, they can speak in public, they might be witty, they could be funny, and you say, you know what, smart witty person, you write it up. You write up the whole thing, and you give the presentation, the smart writer. It's just stupidity. It's not the way it should work. You're doing the wrong tasks. And I think in the past, the Maple Leafs had people in the wrong positions, had people doing the wrong things. And that's less on players, and that's more on management. And whether Kyle Dubas wanted these players or not, which will remain a mystery, he got them, and they're winning. So that's all that matters. Ryan O'Reilly was a good ad. Matthew Nyes, Luke Schenn, Jake McCabe. If you look across the league, these additions on other teams, they're all out. They're done. Boston, all their moves, they're packing. They're done. They're see you later. Tampa, Tanner Jeannot, that trade didn't mean a whole lot. Didn't play games 5 and 6. The Rangers, I'm going to get to them in a minute. They're so fucking pathetic last night. That is a brutal effort from the guys they traded for. The Leafs, to this point, have made the best trade deadline acquisitions, and the players have delivered for them more than any other club. Hard stop. And every player that they've traded for has done what you asked of them. So kudos to the players, and also kudos to Sheldon Keefe, to the coaching staff for getting them to do it, because that's half the battle. You can get somebody to go to school, but if they go to school and they don't read and they don't write and they don't learn anything, what the fuck was the point of going? It's a waste of time. And getting the players in positions to win and seeing them fulfill that has to be such a great feeling for Kyle Dubas, because in the past, his best players didn't, or his acquisitions didn't. And it was just, we get so close and yet we can't cross the finish line. Another person, Ilya Samsonov. He was great in this series. He was calm, he was poised, and he never buckled. He was ready to play. Every game he came out and he battled. He made key saves. Toronto won a 2-1 game, and he could have allowed in a few goals there because Tampa had some good looks. And he beat the king of the league. He beat the best goalie in the NHL. That does not change after one series loss. Just to point that out. You went in, you had better numbers. Your team won the series. Hats off to you. Wasn't going to be Freddie Anderson. Wasn't going to be Jack Campbell. Go through the list of goalies. Optimus Rhyme, Peter Mrazek. It was Ilya Samsonov. Goaltending is such a hard thing to quantify. Goalies are weird. It's a weird time of year. What are you going to get from guys? Who knows? What I do know is that Ilya Samsonov was really good in this series. Ilya Samsonov was good when he had to be, and he made important saves at important times. He had help, but he also made the saves. He wasn't on the team last year. You got him for $1 million. He's been well worth the $1 million. To me, the best trait that the Toronto Maple Leafs have now is I think they're hard on pucks. They turn the pucks over. You might get the puck out of the corner, but if you are a forward or if you're a defenseman, skating up the ice, just expecting an easy transition and not expecting that stick to come across and try to get it back, you are in trouble. Playing the Toronto Maple Leafs now, you have to be guarded at all times. You have to be prepared, and you need to be ready for whatever they're going to throw at you. In the past, it was easy. It was a seamless transition up the ice. And now with guys like Nyes, Ryan O'Reilly, Matthews, who I thought played hard in a more physical game in Game 6, which he should do every night. It's asking for a lot, but he should do it every night. It's a different, you have a different mindset when you know you have to be ready, two hands on the stick, completely set the entire game. And I believe the opponents of the Maple Leafs, and that was the Tampa Bay Lightning in this past series, they had to be prepared for that. Ryan O'Reilly strips a puck, ends up in the back of the net in Game 4. The other night, the Matthews goal is just a complete domination and ends up in the back of the net. But Tampa gets the puck, you force a turnover. You're on them quick. And before you know it, they're dead tired. They're out of position. You're going to score a goal. You're getting good offensive zone opportunities. So being hard on pucks, being a team that played physical, that played tough, that was never the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was never their perception. That was never the team. And yet they've completely morphed. They've changed, and they deserve credit for that. For being a tough team to play against. For being a physical bunch. That's not just acceptance that you're going to do it. You have to do it. And I respect the fact that they've made this transition. But you're not going to win without doing it. You're not going to win without just admitting to yourself, we have to play harder. We have to do this better. If we keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result, then we're fucking insane. The answer was never going to be, let's have a pity party every year. Oh, Game 7, we can't have any luck. That's not the answer to any question in life, is just have a pity party and expect something to change. You need to make tangible differences. You need to do different things if you want something to change. Everybody has this. You could be going through the middle of your life. You want to sell a business. You might want to find a different job. You might just want to be happier on a daily basis. You have to make changes. I think about it all the time. I want to grow this. I want to get into the sports business. I want to, live in a warm weather city someday. These are all different things this is just me personally, but different things we go through all the time in life. And the Maple Leafs went through a transition of a team that still had some of the same pieces, but were a different team to play against. They weren't the same easy team to transition against, to beat. And they deserve credit for that. They deserve credit for establishing themselves and not being just a cakewalk, a walkover. And, John Tavares ends up getting the overtime winner. It's a fitting moment. He scored the overtime winner when the Islanders ended their streak, when they finally won a first round. He scores the goal that ends the Maple Leafs streak of not winning a first round since 2004. So he scored two really huge goals in his career. He's had obviously some other big moments. This is a big one for him. He needed that. He needed a signature moment in his Leafs career because, in my opinion, so far he hasn't. He's been a good Leafs player. He had an awesome start. But I think if you ask most of Leaf Nation, is John Tavares one of their favorite players? I don't think he would be. But he has a moment now. You have something to remember him. Florida will remember Carter Verhaeghe forever because he scored that goal. John Tavares will be remembered for this moment. Whether the Leafs go on to win the Cup or not, we'll get to that in a second on where they should be favored. He has that moment. He has that. He can look back with his kids and say, I ended a 19-year drought. I scored that goal. I brought the Leafs nation to euphoria. After 19 years of misery, after rebuilds and failures and game sevens and just an embarrassment at times, I ended the pain. And he has that now. So credit to John for getting that moment himself. Because I truly think he needed something in his career, and in particular his Leafs career, because he has something in Long Island that you can remember him for. Because he's never going to win a Rocket in Toronto. He's never going to win a Hart. So he's not going to be an individual award, but a moment you remember forever. A moment you remember forever, good or bad. We remember the big hits. We remember Bobby Orr flying through the air. We remember Patrick Kane's overtime winner against the Philadelphia Flyers. I think back to some of my early memories. They're not all Stanley Cup final. I remember Alec Martinez scoring the 2014 Game 7 conference final goal against the Chicago Blackhawks that LA would go on to win the Stanley Cup. Huge goal. I remember Kevin Bieksa scoring the overtime winner to beat the San Jose Sharks in 2011 to get the Canucks to the Stanley Cup final. Pretty big moment. So Bieksa never won a cup, but he has that as a Vancouver Canuck. And Canucks fans know that moment and they'll remember it forever. So there's value in that. Now looking ahead, the Leafs lines for tonight's game, they're no longer going 11-7, which I think is good. No Eric Gustafsson, get him off the ice. I think that was a bit of overreaction to go 11-7. To me, if there's an injury or somebody's not playing well, Justin Hall should go back into the lineup, not Eric Gustafsson. He's still a much better defenseman than Gustafsson. I know Leafs fans hate him. Doesn't mean they're right. He has his problems, absolutely. But anyway, they won a lot of games. He was in the lineup and he didn't play so well. We sit here today. The first round is over. The New York Rangers are out. Tampa Bay Lightning are out. The Boston Bruins are out. And this is not hyperbole. This is not a hot take, in my opinion. It's just the facts. The Toronto Maple Leafs should be the favorite to get to the Stanley Cup final in the Eastern Conference. And I'll even say if they don't get to the Stanley Cup final this season, is a failure. They should be the favorite, and they should get there. No doubt about it. Carolina is without Andrei Svechnikov. You could argue their most important forward. Toronto missing their most important forward? No, they don't have any injuries. They're healthy. Matt Murray, who cares? They don't have any injuries. They got the best player remaining in the Eastern Conference. Maybe. Another guy in Florida who's pretty good. We'll get to that in a minute. But you have the best team. You might have the best player. Get Marner, too. Might be better than the guy in the team. Might be better than 34. You could argue you have the best goalie. Taking Bobrovsky? I don't know. I'll take my chances with Samsonov over goalie Bob. Who should be favored over the Leafs? The Devils haven't won a playoff series since 2012. The Devils are a young team and still have a lot to prove. Carolina's without their best forward. Florida. Yes, they were the President's Trophy winning team last year, but they were a different team. They just had their emotional moment. They beat the Bruins. They had their time. They had their moment. Euphoria. They had their least moment. Might even be a bigger scale because you defeated the best regular season team in the history of the league. But should Florida be favored over Toronto? Why? They finished about 15 points behind them in the standings. Toronto's dominated Florida all year. Paul Maurice, old coach, playing his old team. The Maple Leafs are the favorite to get to the Stanley Cup final out of the Eastern Conference. Period. End of story. They should get there. They should be the favorite. They should get there. And if they don't, the season is absolutely a failure. Because sometimes the barriers change. Sometimes expectations change when you look at your situation. Should I get the highest grade on this test? Well, probably not if I'm in there with everybody. But if I'm taking a test and I have one other person with me and that kid's in grade 6 and I'm a 24-year-old, I should probably do better than him. I'm not saying the rest of the teams are chopped liver. I'm not saying they're all bad, but they're not as good as Toronto. That's where I look at this. It's just plain and simple. They're not as good. They're good, not great. They have more holes. They have more pitfalls. You have more worry with these other clubs. And I don't see that many worries with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Could they lose? Absolutely. Because it's the playoffs and we've seen what's happened so far. Being the favorite is not a good thing because you end up losing. But Leafs Nation, I'm here to tell you, they should be the favorite. They should get to the Stanley Cup final. Your expectations should change. You beat the Lightning. You don't have to beat the Bruins. You don't have to beat the Rangers. Just think about it. Boil it down that way. You don't have to beat any of those teams. Why shouldn't you be the favorite to get to the Stanley Cup final? Come up with a good reason for me, and I'll hear you out. I don't think you will. They'd be the favorite on sports books anyway, because sports books are sports books. This is the common sense book. This is the let's go smart book. I've heard that before. Probably not a trademark, the old smart book, but I'm going to tell you right now. They should be. They should be. You beat Tampa. Credit to Tampa, I got to say. Credit to the Tampa Bay Lightning. You've been through a lot. You battled. You weren't as good a team. You had no Eric Chernak. And yet, the Tampa Bay Lightning pushed it to 6 games. Victor Hedman played on one leg. And I love what they accomplished. I thought they played extremely well. Extremely well. They all played Toronto in the series, as I mentioned. And yet they still didn't do enough. And the wear and tear of the seasons came out. unfortunately. But I love what Tampa has done. I think they've represented the league extremely well. John Cooper, a brilliant coach. But this team's in a weird position. I don't know where they go. They have a lot of flaws. And truthfully, they're old. Their best player, Braden Point, is 28. Steven Stamkos is getting older and older. He looked lost in the series, quite frankly. Victor Hedman has played a lot of hockey. He's a big man. He's taken a lot of damage, a lot of wear and tear. So what does he have left to give? That's a question. So I think the Tampa Bay Lightning need this time to kind of repair themselves. But if we look at the Eastern Conference and in particular the Atlantic Division, Ottawa's getting better. I don't have as much faith in Ottawa as I do the Buffalo Sabres. I love Buffalo. I like what they're building. I think they got a fun team. They play a fun style. So I appreciate what Buffalo is doing. They got a young kid, Devin Levi, in net. If he can find his way, Buffalo can be a playoff team next year. Does that mean Tampa comes out, Florida comes out? So much changes in a year. And I'm not writing off Tampa because they still have Point, Kucherov, Hedman. So you never want to say they're done. But what I do think is they're closer to the Pittsburgh teams and where they are to, say, Toronto contending every year, or I think even Colorado, who obviously had a setback, they will be able to compete regularly. Tampa will have to make some decisions because they have guys on long-term contracts like Point, like Kucherov, like Hedman, like Vasilevsky. So the core of their team is older. But to me, the reason they lost the series is lack of depth. They didn't have as much depth as Toronto. They didn't have the Noah Chari to score a big goal. They didn't have Matthew Nyes, like that kid playing at that level. I still think the Tanner Jeannot trade can work out. I think they can find him, hopefully try to parlay that. Hopefully he can play better down the line, be that big, versatile forward that they're hoping for. Whether that happens or not, it's a whole other story. But Tampa needs this time to rest. They need to think about what they want to do with their team moving forward and just really look at their roster. And they've made hard decisions in the past where McDonough had to go. They had to get rid of Yanni Gourde, who they missed dearly. Look at Seattle. And just see, okay, this is who we want to keep. And this is who we need. This is who we need to keep. Better way to phrase it. This is who we're willing to lose. And these are just pieces we can't have anymore. We can't play these guys if we hope to win. Because Pittsburgh went through a phase where they won, then they didn't win for almost a decade. That could happen with Tampa. Vasilevsky's only 28 years old. He's still the best goalie in the world. And I don't think he wants to leave Tampa because you're in a great situation. You're in a good tax state. Why would you want to leave? I wouldn't. Good weather. I can throw a bunch of other positive things onto this boiling pot. But they're not at the Toronto level. They're not at these certain thresholds. But also the Eastern Conference is in a weird place because we're talking about the final four teams here. And none of them have gone really deep in the playoffs in the last number of years other than Carolina. And who trusts Carolina? You love their coach, but you don't love their scoring. They lack a whole bunch of things that the great teams have. So it's a weird position that we're in here in the Eastern Conference. The Rangers are kind of an old team. Tampa's an older team. Boston obviously is an older team. So we're going to weed them out and see what happens. Because if there's a bunch of retirements in Boston, that can spark change too. And before you know it, the floodgates are wide open. Now, pivoting to the Boston-Florida series. Truly, my first thought on this series is I go to the game-winning goal in overtime. And if you weren't watching the game or you forget how it goes, there's a puck below the Boston net. And there's a scramble for it, and Florida's top line is on the ice with Tkachuk, Carter Verhaeghe, and Sam Bennett. And Tkachuk goes behind that, and he wrestles for the loose puck. He's fighting for it, he's fighting for position, and before you know it, he gets it. He gets the puck loose, it gets to Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett able to cycle the puck, get it to Verhaeghe. Tkachuk establishes a screen in front, and Verhaeghe goes top cheese over Jeremy Swayman. So Swayman over Omar. My thought here is that goal never would have happened if Jonathan Huberdeau was on that team. Jonathan Huberdeau is a very talented player, but asking Jonathan Huberdeau to do grunt work, to give extra effort, is just not in his vocabulary. There's a reason that he lost in Calgary. He's complaining about Daryl Sutter now, and Mathew Tkachuk is winning. Because Mathew Tkachuk is willing to put in the effort. He's willing to fight for position, and this guy just simply isn't. He's not willing to do it. That's not the way he's approaching this. I thought it was such an easy moment for me to see. Tkachuk is in that spot. He has the ability to make a play. And he did it. He fought for the loose puck. He created the opportunity that led to the goal. Again, this is Florida. And Florida wins this series. They won a series last year against Washington, but Washington was a very flawed team that had no business really being in the playoffs. So it was a win, but then they went and played Tampa. A true test. A team that is truly playoff built, and you lost in 4 games. So it showed Bill Zito, Florida brass, that we're not that close. Because we couldn't beat our biggest rival. We didn't even get close to winning this team. So how are we going to change? How are we going to do this? They looked at Huberdeau and said, hey, he's good, very talented. He's been on this team a long time, but we want to win. And at the end of the day, this is business. We are going to trade him for Mathew Tkachuk because we think it gives us a better chance to win. And that's all that matters. That's the only justification you need. It's the only justification you need because that's all the point of pro sports is winning. So they make the trade. Uyghur's gone. Huberdeau's gone. You bring in Tkachuk. And now you look at it. You wouldn't have won that series with John and Huberdeau. You win it with Mathew Tkachuk. And he's truly, now it's cemented after this series, the way he played in the playoffs last year, the way he's played in the last 2 regular seasons. It's not just always good some nights. He's one of the best players in the NHL, period. Mathew Tkachuk is a top 10 player. Top 10 player. He does everything you'd want. He competes his ass off. He's a winner if there ever was one. And that's what Florida got. They looked at their team, like I think Toronto did, and said, we can't win the way we're going here. So we need to make changes to give ourselves a better chance of winning. Because what we've been doing doesn't work. And applause for realizing what Mathew Tkachuk is. But you look at this series. Tkachuk, Bennett, Verhaeghe, Montour. Montour's a very skilled player, but the guy has some bite in him. He has some compete. He battles his ass off. He is not going to give up free ice. He played tough the entire series. He was all over the score sheet, but he played big minutes. He got into scrums. He wasn't afraid to mix it up when he had to. Florida had a playoff mentality in October. And that can be difficult because playoff mentality in October doesn't work. The team struggled through the regular season. They barely made the playoffs. It came down to the last game of the year, and they snuck in. But that's all you got to do is get in. And they've been playing this different style. They've been playing the Paul Maurice style of play, and it's very different from Andrew Brunette and from what they were doing with Joel Quenneville. But they made the pivot, and it's worked. This team believes, they buy in. Another one of my favorites on this Florida team is Luosterainen. Watch him in the Leaf series. He's a very smart player. He's first on pucks. He blocks shots. Great defensive center. He has great instincts. The Panthers, as a team, I don't love their defense core at all. At all, I don't. I love Montour. Ekblad's solid. I still have an affinity for him. But Mark Stahl, you go through Forsling, it's okay. But it was just a work ethic style of team. And they force you into bad decisions. And that was their key to victory. Was their ability, or you could say Boston's inability, to figure out how to avoid potholes, how to avoid trouble. We have the puck. How can we make quicker exits out of the zone? They're D-gapped up like I wanted them to when I talked about it in the preview. They just completely went after them. They made life difficult. They forechecked. They were physical. And before you know it, Boston didn't know what the hell was happening. And Boston was up 3-1 in the series. Marchand had a breakaway in Game 5 that could have sealed it. Boston had a 3-2 lead in Game 7. But Florida found a way. And one thing I think Florida did with Paul Maurice that Boston did not do with Jimmy Montgomery behind the bench. Florida never panicked. Florida never panicked, and they never freaked out. To me, I saw times where Jim Montgomery made the goalie change. He made decisions that I thought were a bit chaotic. He would decide to go to different players, taking players out of the lineup, making line changes in game. I didn't agree with all of them. To me, he could have been smarter in his decision making. And he wasn't. He panicked. He made decisions that I wouldn't have. And Paul Maurice, as calm as he can be, which is not always that calm, remain calm. Let it breathe. Didn't break up the Tkachuk line to try to spark something. He kept his best line together. Verhaeghe, Bennett, Tkachuk. They stayed together the whole series. Other than Nick Cousins hopping on every now and then for a shift. But he stayed with what was working because they were the driving force of that team. It was a weird pivot for Boston for a team that, and you could argue they never had to worry about it. They never had to make big changes, but on the fly, so many line combinations, so many people David Pastrnak is playing with. Why? Why is Pastrnak playing with DeBrusque? And then he's playing with these teams. It was just a calamity of crap, of lack of confidence. I didn't get it. To me, it was a team that was not prepared, that overthought it. And I thought it was a lack of preparation and a lack of being there. You've won 65 games with basically the same lineup. Trent Frederick has hands like bricks. But he's an effective player because he's a bottom six guy that's physical, that can separate you from the puck, and I like how he plays. Why was he ever taken out of the lineup? Why was he taken out? You know what he does well. He does some stuff that I hate too. But again, you know what he brings to your team. Why is Garnet Hathaway being bumped down? Why is his minutes being cut? Another thing in the series for Boston. I love Charlie McAvoy. I think he's one of the best defensemen in the world. He's one of the defensemen not talked about enough. I thought he had a horrible series. He turned the puck over a ton, and at the end of it, he was hardly playable. Having the puck on his stick was like having a grenade. It was going everywhere. Explosion here, explosion there. And it was never a pass to his team or a play that made sense. Oddly enough, Dmitry Orlov was fantastic. Oddly enough, Tyler Bertuzzi, deadline acquisition, was fantastic. But McAvoy's minutes should have been cut because he was not helping the team at the end of the day. He was a problem more than a solution. And you never want that to be the case. In Game 7, just going to look this up for fun. He played 28 minutes. That's way too many minutes. Orlov played 28. I thought Orlov played well. He should have played 28. Lindholm only played 23. I would have played Lindholm more. Grzelcyk played 13 again. Forbort 14. Carlo played 22. Give out those minutes more. But as you look at this team, it's a staggering loss, no doubt about it, for Boston to go out in the first round. If I'm the Boston Bruins, I go into this offseason and it's very interesting. Krejci had a great Game 7, but I don't want him back. He's injured too much. He's too old. And he was a great Bruin. I get it. I'm not a fan, so I don't have any attachment to these players, but I don't want Krejci back. He can go. Great. Thank you for the service. You're always welcome as a Bruin. I'm not retiring his number. It's too much, but you can have a day for him maybe down the line. If he wants to come back from the Czech Republic, great. Other than that, thanks. Thanks for the memories. Patrice Bergeron, does he come back? He was clearly injured in the series. Talked about that after. I would still take him because I think he had a great year. Still a fantastic player. But Boston's low on draft picks now after this season, after going all in. Everybody's a year older. Kind of have some indecision in net. Allmark's under contract. Swayman's going to be a free agent. So who's your starting goaltender next year? And this sounds crazy to say because Allmark is going to win the Vezina Trophy. But there's decisions there. Does Boston want to take a swing at Mark Scheifele? I thought before the Islanders swooped in that Bo Horvat could be the replacement for Bergeron in Boston. That's not going to happen. Could it be Mark Scheifele? I think it would make sense. Like Mark Scheifele's a good player. I think he'd fit the Bruins culture, if you will. Rick Bowness might disagree. But could Mark Scheifele become a Bruin? Could you make a trade and still stay competitive? So I'm saying this Atlantic Division is very interesting because the Bruins are going through a transition. The Tampa Bay Lightning are out in the first round for the first time since 2018. So 2019. These teams are older. They've been through a lot. Do players want to come back and go through another whole 82-game grind? Who knows? For the Bruins, it's a choke. It's a choke on a lot of different fronts. And this team had a hell of an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup and go out champions for Krejci, for Bergeron, and now they won't. It's a tough pill to swallow. I can't imagine what it's like in Boston. The Bruins lose a Game 7. The Celtics lose Game 1 last night to the Sixers without Joel Embiid, their best player. Been a rough couple days in the city of Boston. Let's get to the Rangers. For the season, I picked the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup. Boy, was I wrong. And doubt first started to creep into my mind at the trade deadline after I saw what Chris Drury did to this team. His first move was getting Vladimir Tarasenko. Vladimir Tarasenko, who has not been an elite player since before the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup, 2 shoulder surgeries since, and has been frequently injured or less than swell in St. Louis. So that was their first move. Hated it. They got Tyler Mott. I didn't mind that on the 4th line. Had him before. Then there was the Patrick Kane trade. To me, it made sense to get Patrick Kane, or it made sense to get Vladimir Tarasenko. Not both, because they play too similar. But they decide we're going to get both guys. Screw depth on the back end. We're going to get these 2 guys up front, and we're going to ride it out. So now you have Tarasenko, you have Artemi Panarin, and you have Patrick Kane, who all play similarly. A little soft and a little skilled with not much else to bring to the table. And at that point, I started to worry about the Rangers, and I really questioned what the hell they were doing. Chris Drury went full analytics. He went full Kyle Dubas on the trade deadline. He got the big splash names. He got the players that have brand name, that have value, but don't fit in to this team. This team used to be big, physical, tough, and they are no longer that. You add Adam Fox to that mix of the players here, of soft players that don't bring a whole lot to the table, that don't have a whole lot of pushback. It left you with Chris Kreider, who was always going to give you an effort, no matter what. You look, Hedl, Kakko, Kane, Panarin, Schneider, Tarasenko, VC. The New York Rangers, in 7 games, in 3 of the games they played absolutely pathetic. Complete no-shows that they really should be ashamed of, quite frankly. And the best players for the Rangers sucked. Complete garbage, not good enough. And I'm going to start with Artemi Panarin because I just can't stand the player. Artemi Panarin is like a cold sore. You see it on your face. It's ugly. You wish you didn't have it, but at least you know you can get rid of it. It's going to go away. But the thing about a cold sore is you get one, you're going to get another one. It's not like the chicken pox. You have it once and it goes away. You have a cold sore, you get it, okay, you can treat it, but it's going to come back eventually. And that's what Artemi Panarin is. There are times you watch him play. He's one of the best passers in the league. He's a master with the puck, and he makes you fall into this sense of security. He makes you think he's one of the best players in the league, and he's nowhere close to being one of the best players in the league. Artemi Panarin is not worth fuck all. He is masquerading as a great player. He is talked about as a great player, and he's paid like an elite player, and he doesn't perform like one. People that run fantasy drafts, people that are nerds when it comes to stats, will tell you that Artemi Panarin is one of the best players in recent memory. You couldn't pay me enough to put him on my team. Gerard Gallant, who I know is just a guy who has principle, that coaches hard and likes physical teams, must have hated to coach this Rangers team. Because Artemi Panarin is one of your leaders, and he is completely not what you want. It was a pathetic performance. 3 of the 7 games, they did not show up. The only guy I can give credit to last night was Jacob Trouba, who threw a great hit. On Timo Meier. Completely clean. Keep your head up. Love that there wasn't a call on the play. For once, they got it right. But other than him, Mika Zibanejad's one of my favorites. He was brutal in this series. Brutal. Missed the net way too much. Indecisive on when to pass and when to shoot the puck. Was poor in decision-making. Back check, not there. His compete level faded. And as I said the other day, the Rangers had this Panarin malaise. That's what I call it. When one player on your team doesn't give effort, when one player on your team is completely devoid of competitiveness, he doesn't care, he's just going to do whatever the hell he wants to do, you get in a malaise. You get in a false sense of security. You just feel like you can do whatever you do on a given day to get by. You're getting nowhere in life with that mentality. And that was fucking Panarin. He sucked last night. He sucked in this series. And 9 times out of 10 in the playoffs, he's not worth a fuck. And the Rangers are stuck with him because he has a full no move. Imagine waking up to that. This guy has a no move. There's some bad no moves around the league, and I'm sure there's a worse one than Panarin because people will come back to me and say, oh, he's not that bad of a player. No. Oh, he is. He is. Watch the real game. Don't just look at statistics. But to think that he, at that cap number, has a full no move clause makes me sick. It's disgusting. Make you want to vomit to see how that guy can control his own destiny. I don't like to root for this for anybody. And I'm half kidding here, but really not really. Because the Rangers are thinking this as well. They wish he'd be deported. They wish he could be deported or something happens with that visa and maybe the contract would be null and void because he broke a rule. That is their hope for him. They did not just lose because of Artemi Panarin, but he certainly didn't help. He certainly didn't help because he did nothing to help them. He was garbage. Complete crap. Patrick Kane. You weren't good enough either, my friend. I've never seen anything like that Rangers series where literally 3 games they had no pushback. None. They outshot the Devils last night. Didn't feel like it. Didn't feel like it because all those shot opportunities they got were crap. Crap. How about this for all the older people listening that like plus minus? Zibanejad -3 last night. Tarasenko -3. Big surprise. Where's my guy, Panarin? -2. 19 minutes. 19 minutes of crap, garbage. Kreider was a -4. Patrick Kane. It's just... It was a pathetic performance. 3 of the 4 games in that series, the New York Rangers didn't even show up. Didn't have skates. And they should have won this series. And yet they lose in 7, and in Game 7, they don't even show up to the rink ready to play. Mind-boggling to see them do this. We also know that we are guaranteed a new champion this year. Sunday night, the Seattle Kraken pulled off the upset of the century, defeating the Colorado Avalanche. Well, not really, because I thought Seattle would give them a go. But Seattle pulled off the upset, defeating Colorado Avalanche 2-1 in a Game 7 on the road after being destroyed in Game 6. The Seattle Kraken, in the second year of their franchise, are going to the second round. Philip Grubauer made 34 saves. Revenge series for him against his old team. He was fantastic in it. He had a .971 save percentage in Game 7, .921 in Game 6, .929 in Game 5. He only played 39 games in the regular season, .895 save percentage, but he's found it. And here's the big thing for me. Seattle's full of misfits. They didn't have their best player, but they still found a way to win. How? Here's how. They've scooped up great talent. Donato, Vince Dunn, who's been fantastic. Eberle's a solid veteran. Yanni Gourde is the heart and soul of this team. If they're going to name a captain, I think he'd be it. Adam Larsson's been very good all postseason long. He played 27 minutes in Game 7. Jamie Alexiak, another big physical defenseman who's got a lot of playoff experience, played 24 minutes. These two guys played a ton. But how about also looking around and saying, we see this player, Columbus, they signed Johnny Gaudreau. They've re-signed Patrick Laine. They are over the salary cap. Yes, Columbus was over the salary cap at one point. They were basically at the cap floor. They're basically at the top of the salary cap this year with their team. And they have one of the best odds to get Connor Bedard, which the draft lottery is a week from yesterday. So 6 days away. They spent all that money, and that's how bad of a team they were. So that's Columbus for you. But Seattle saw, there's this guy named Oliver Bjorkstrand from Denmark, pretty good player. He can score 20 goals. He's a good 20-goal scorer. Columbus needs to get rid of somebody off their roster. It's going to be Bjorkstrand. Seattle says, you know what, we'll take him. We'll take him for you. We'll give a fourth-round pick for him because you need to get rid of him. So Seattle gets him for virtually nothing. You get a guy for virtually nothing. Did he have the regular season you thought he would? Pretty much. How about 20 goals right in the dot? 20-goal score. Perfect. Scored 28 the year before. He scored 21 his career, 23. He's a 20-goal scorer. Even that out, he's a 20-goal scorer. But how about in Game 7? For a guy that was just thrown overboard because they needed the money. He scores both goals. He goes full Max Talbot, gets 2 goals in a Game 7 to propel the Kraken to the second round. Colorado, gone. Boston, gone. Rangers, gone. Tampa, gone. All of these upsets have transpired in the first round. How about Heat beating the Bucks? Golden State getting by Sacramento. Just craziness galore in the NBA. Memphis, a 2 seed, going out. Pro sports is in absolute anarchy right now because everything that you think would make sense doesn't. Teams that you expect to win are not. And Dallas also advances. They get by Minnesota. I like that team a lot. I love their goaltender. I like the cut of their jib. They're starting to play a hell of a lot better. They have depth. Their power play is one of the most deadly in the postseason. Carolina Hurricanes advanced Friday night over the Islanders, an overtime win. The Edmonton Oilers are through. The Vegas Golden Knights will meet up. Edmonton's a much different team than they were last year, and they made the conference final last year. To make the conference final and to be in the second, and I feel better about the Edmonton Oilers because they're a way better team than they were last year. And that's credit to them for building a strong group, for building a team that can win with more than one dimension to them. And also having Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid doesn't hurt. Now, I want to come on later today and talk about the second round series and talk about the NFL draft. So that's what's on the docket later on today. Just over an hour here. Good to talk about these series. I had a lot of thoughts about them. Before I sign off, yesterday the Calgary Flames announced that they had fired Daryl Sutter. This move makes sense to me as their head coach. He has 2 years left at $4 million, so they got to pay him $8 million over the next 2 years to go work on the farm. Woof. I said this a month ago. They had to do this. They had to do this because you're going to bring back basically the same team. So there had to be changes because if you're bringing back the same group of players for the most part, because they all have long-term deals and the same head coach, and he's not going to change his philosophy, what's going to change? I read yesterday that the Flames are big on their American League coach. They're still playing the Calgary Wranglers in the Calder Cup postseason. So I'm not even sure if they could interview him yet because he's still coaching. But he's somebody that they like. See here. But that's the only name I've seen so far when it comes to their hire. The Rangers, I read this morning that there's some talk that I think the Rangers weren't happy with how the season went. Gerard Gallant could be in the hot seat. That could be Chris Drury looking to fire him because he knows he should be the one that gets fired, but he won't because he just recently got the job. So Darren Dreger reports that with the existing coaching vacancies and speculation around a coaching change for the New York Rangers, Quenneville's return is a strong possibility. That's Joel Quenneville. Dreger adds that a formal interview request will likely encourage the commissioner's approval to reinstate Joel Quenneville. So he hasn't been reinstated yet since the whole debacle with the Blackhawks and when he was coaching with Florida at the time. So there's still some teams that need a head coach. Obviously, Calgary now, the Rangers potentially. I still don't know with Ottawa. They could still make a decision to make. They still don't have a new ownership yet, so who knows what's happening there. We got Nashville's up in the air because I still think Barry Trotz is looking at his options. We have Anaheim. They need a new head coach. Columbus needs a new head coach. So there's some vacancies around the league. None have been filled as of yet. I do think a big part of that will be the draft lottery next week. If you're a head coach and you know you will get Connor Bedard, it's a nice carrot to dangle in front of you to take the job to begin with. Not a bad way to start a relationship. Also breaking news as we're live, Green Bay Packers signed quarterback Jordan Love to a 1-year extension worth up to $22.5 million, $13.5 million guaranteed. The deal takes the place of Love's 5th-year option for 2024. So this will save them some money. They declined his 5th-year option, but they gave him a 1-year deal anyway, so he's under contract for this season and next season, Jordan Love, to be hopefully the quarterback of the future of the Green Bay Packers. So that's what's on the horizon. Later on today, be back, preview the second-round series, and talk about the NFL draft because I haven't been able to get to that yet, so I have some thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed this part 1 of the 2 parts today of the show. Until then, take care. Enjoy your day, folks. This is To The Point.